Hello, welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in, sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back if you have. My intention is unity and oneness. I wanted to just talk a little bit about the healing journey and some of the energies that a lot of us are experiencing right now and go from there. The first question I'm being invited to kind of address is I'm working on myself. How come I don't feel better? I've been working, I've been feeling great, and all of a sudden I've had this shift in energy. What's wrong with me? Where else do I go? I've been sensing this, that something's on the horizon. I can't quite put my finger on it, and I feel anxious and restless right now. I feel this shift happening, but it doesn't feel good. I could go on and on. So I'm just inviting you to ask yourself, have I been there? Have I done this before? Am I experiencing this now? And I'm going to give an overview of, first of all, from my perspective, what's going on energetically. But I also want to give an overview for those who have gone through, let's say, some healing journeys and maybe are experiencing some discomfort. And I go through this myself. I've gone through this as well. And I'll give it for instance. I had someone that I know who had energy work done years ago, and they had something going on physically that they didn't know they had going on, having to do with, well, it doesn't matter, but they had something going on. And we'll say it was an infection that was brewing. They had energy work done, Reiki, energy healing, theta healing, whatever you want to call this energy work. And shortly thereafter, within 48 hours, they became extremely ill, extremely sick, and they had to go to the urgent care and then be put on antibiotics and all this stuff. When that was happening, the healer who was working with this individual received a message or a download or a message from this person's loved one, telling them, you're going to be fine. So this person's loved one, their mother, came through and said, I just want you to know you're going to be okay. Neither one of them really knew why that message came through until this individual got really sick. And then the healer was like, okay, now I know why that message came through. So what happened was there were things inside the body, the template, the temple, the architecture, the blueprint of this particular human, which we all have, that had been brewing below the surface. When you do healing work, whether it be energy work, whether it be exercise, yoga, breath work, sometimes it can be plant medicine, it can be any type of spiritual journeying, deep meditation. Sometimes it's going through grief or a loss that pulls up all of this stuck energy. And so rather than having this incredible healing experience and feeling like, oh, sunshine and rainbows, this particular person went through kind of a dark night of the soul and became really, really sick. I've gone through this a couple of times in my life, and that's a whole other story. If you guys have followed me for a while, you kind of know a few of my stories about how I kind of came to be in this place that I'm in now, sharing this with you. But what I always am called to share with most people is this too shall pass. This too shall pass. None of it's permanent. We aren't permanent. Well, we're infinite, but we're not permanent in this reality. So what I was shown was just a remembrance for me to share with you guys to remember this. As we're going on this journey, we may not necessarily realize at the time what is being cleared, removed, etc. Or we might be very well aware of it, but either way, we might feel discomfort. We might feel uncomfortable as these things are being cleared. We might not know what they are, and that might bring more discomfort. We might realize what they are, not be able to fix it instantly, which brings more discomfort. And we might be seeing this clearing in the collective body, And that can make us uncomfortable. We might be feeling things clearing in the collective body as this organism that we are all part of, connected through on this earth template. We're all part of that architecture. So when there are big events that are going on, we'll start with the collective in the world, whether it be earthquake, natural disasters, we'll say, whatever those natural disasters are, whether it be a collective experience of trauma, sadness, or the opposite end. It could be a celebration. It could be a really good thing that everybody's excited about. We feel that at a cellular level. It's quantum. It's entanglement. It's spooky action at a distance, as Einstein called it. It's the connection and the oneness that we're experiencing. Now, without me going into the us versus them storyline, which I might dive into that a little bit because, well, okay, I'm being called to go there. So I will. My guides are like, why not? Let's do it. My team. So there's a lot of stuff, and everything I'm talking about in the collective, I'd love to invite you to apply to your own personal life. There is a lot of stuff in the collective right now that is being cleared, dissolved, removed. And while it's really fun to think that we can instantly move from one version of reality into another, it's also important to realize that sometimes that comes with baggage. We come with baggage as a human, having many lifetimes, going through karma, going through this, learning, having emotions, having feelings, right? So as we move into this new golden age of reality that everybody's talking about, we're moving out of something. And in order to move out of that, sometimes the transition, the integration of remembering who we really are, letting go of those things that we're not, is uncomfortable. I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but as a collective, we've held on to belief systems, structures, paradigms about everything. Compartmentalize, compartmentalize, compartmentalize. And as those pieces of our reality start to go away or start to become very loud or start to be highlighted so that we can recognize what's happening in our reality, or so that we can just integrate that and let go of it, or that old stuck energy, as if, for instance, in battlefields, right? People go and they see the spheres, the orbs, energy they feel at these battlefields because there's been all of this energy stuck there that was a coagulation of something we gave power to, whether it be fear, anger, trauma, sadness. In the case of a battle, you would have all of those things. And then you have that kind of poured into the earth energetically, and in concentrated amounts, it becomes an entity. It becomes a wound. In cranial sacral, as a for instance, it might be called an energy cyst. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that briefly, and I'm not a cranial sacral therapist, but from what I understand, what happens is if you fall and let's say you hit your elbow, this is your impact point, but the energy of that impact travels throughout and it might get stuck here, might get stuck there, it might get stuck up in our neck, it might get stuck in the back. So we don't just have a hurt elbow, our shoulder bothers us or our right side of our neck, whatever it might be. That's an example of the well, I could go into so many different levels, but this is the impact zone, and all those other little zones are relevant for I was trying to think of the name, but quantum. So that's the spooky action at a distance. Not literally. I mean, what I'm describing is not exactly that, but if something happens here, we might have the impacts of it here or even mentally. And we can think of that just for fun in this particular example of the spooky action at a distance. But I didn't fall there. I didn't even hit that area. Yet that area is still impacted because it's connected to this area, right? So let's think about that on the earth. So what happens is we're going through this geomagnetic uplifting. There, everything is shifting and moving, and all of this energy, and let's call it energetic cysts of coagulated stuff, maybe over trillions, billions of years. The earth is a collection. It is a nesting doll of all these realities. I'm going a little quantum here, but just bear with me. Those are being released. They're being exercised. They're being highlighted. They're coming to the surface. And sometimes some of those cysts, before they pop and release, we'll think of it like a balloon or a bubble. Kind of gross, I know. They require a lot more poking in order to get that open, to get it to be released. And sometimes it's so old, right? It takes so much for it to dissolve that it takes more time, but it's still there. If you've ever had something in your body that's there that's causing sickness, it's like once you get it removed, oh, it's such relief, right? But we work around it. We do other things to try to balance it out. We may not know what it is. We're uncomfortable, so on and so forth. Even if it's something that's fixable, that can be fixed by physical therapy, for example, it's still not fun to do the physical therapy. And oftentimes we're sore and even more uncomfortable and in discomfort until finally one day we're like, oh my goodness, I can move my shoulder. My tennis elbow went away. So I'm getting goosebumps here. This is relevant for what's happening now on Earth. So if you have ever had an injury and you have, let's say, tennis elbow, all of a sudden you might find that your wrist hurts. You might find that you're not sleeping well, right? So we're sensing all of this as a collective, and all of these energy cysts from the past, from the current, all this baggage that's been collecting and kind of holding us down is being released, and it's very uncomfortable. So I wanted to just go in, I got a little distracted there, sorry. So I hope this is making sense for some people, like following. So it's all energy. And for those of us that are sensitive, I'll talk briefly to you guys specifically that are healers or feel like you've got some innate gift, which everybody does, but some people have it stronger than others. And I'm just going to talk about that briefly. Whenever I'm doing a session with someone, everybody's so different, but there are certain people that I can sense this person's a natural healer. They have a different frequency, a different feeling, a different parts of the system are turned on and maybe other parts are turned off. Or maybe it's all on, or maybe it's all off. Just because someone is a healer doesn't mean that they themselves are ready to go into that career or modality and offering it. Just because someone is a psychic or intuitive doesn't mean they know they are, right? I can sense it, I can feel it, or that they've admitted it, right? Or that they want to use it. Just because we have a gift doesn't mean that's necessarily what we need to do for our profession. Some people are just very grounded and they aren't interested in intuition or having healing abilities. They just want to have a good life. They just want to talk about how they can focus easier, how they can, and that person might just be very intelligent and very analytical and logical. How can they expand that gift and be more balanced and harmonious? So everybody's different. And just because in all of these categories, everybody's had experiences. Some people have had difficult lifestyles. Some people have had a traumatic childhood. Some people have gone through a very difficult relationship. Some people have been the people who have been difficult, and they're looking to change that, to make amends, to have a better life, to help people. Maybe they weren't so good when they were younger and they tortured their brothers and sisters and were the bully. And now all of a sudden they had something happen that has caused them to rethink their life. So I could go on and on and on with all of these examples. Doesn't matter, we're all still connected. So as these things are happening in the earth, and this is also has to do, if we're feeling this, especially around a full moon, a new moon, major astrological alignments, during massive solar flare activity. And I know I don't know the difference between solar wind and coronal mass ejection and flares and all of that. I'm just saying enhanced photonic light coming in and stirring everything up, we're all going to feel it. The weather feels it, the weather response. So anyways, our bodies respond. So we've got all of that going on anyways. And then in addition to that, we're starting to open up our gifts. We're starting to do our healing work. We're starting to have these awakenings. For anyone who's been or had a Kundalini awakening, it isn't always sunshine and rainbows. I always there's a couple examples I use that I think are good for symbolism for people to visualize. Number one, it's like being on the bottom of a silty lake and scuba diving. As soon as you start to scrape something, all that stuff lifts and it's hard to see. It feels disorienting. It feels distracting. We are not sure where we are until that dust settles, right? And also I was being shown in a recipe, when you scrape the pan and you get all those particles off, right? In that cooking journey, it's going to muddle the liquid. It's going to make it harder to see. So right now we're scraping off a lot of that. It's bubbling up and we're clearing off the fat. We're making bone broth and we're clearing out the stuff that maybe was useful at one time or wasn't, but no longer is for the new era that we're moving into. And I also feel called briefly to say, I do feel that for some people, it's just going to be easy peasy. They're going to be like, yeah, I'm fine, actually. I moved from this density into this density, and what's next, right? And there are going to be people that it's very easy for. So I really want to paint that picture, because I know oftentimes I hear teachers say it's not going to be easy. You're going to feel awful. You're going to feel terrible. And that's not always true. Some people aren't. We're just the lucky ones that are feeling awful and terrible. But going through these feelings, okay, and these emotions sometimes gives us more flavor. Just like scraping off those bits on the pan, they flavor the soup. If we let them cake onto the pan and cook onto the pan, it's not really doing much for us, but creating stuck stuff that we're not actually going to get to utilize in our recipe. I'm just being called to play with that as an example. So the reason I'm bringing this up is later on, especially if you're a healer or a tarot card reader or a nurse, right? Or whatever it is. You're a teacher, you're a mom, it really doesn't matter. Let's just say, especially if you're aware of your abilities, or you're aware that you want to help others, or you're aware that things are changing and you like to converse about it, it'll give you more layers, texture. And looking back, and this is what I've found, many of the things I've gone through is so I could help other people get through it too, in their own way. And so that's why I don't like to come on here and say, this is how it's going to be, or this is what you have to do to fix it. I don't feel that anything is the right or wrong answer, because every person is on their own journey. So what works for you may not work for somebody else. that's also something that's really important to recognize moving forward if you are deciding to step out into the world and offer your gifts. The more we have experientially, we are then able to share what did work for us, what didn't work for us, what we've learned, how far we've come, when we've gone backwards, right? Because sometimes that happens too. Sometimes you go through this healing journey and it's like, wow, everything was fine and now I feel awful. Wow, I was really thought I worked through that and now these memories are coming up again. And the thing I wanted to bring about that is time. I want to talk about the cycles of time, but first I want to go back to the earth changes and show you my beautiful artwork. Should I turn off that ring light? It's pretty dark in here. Can you see without? So there we go. So we have Sue or Tom here and Bob, whatever. This beautiful little stick figure is a representation, obviously, of human. But we have these nesting dolls around the human. So when we do healing work, I'm going to use that as an example. Those green sludgy things are, let's call them energy cysts that I was referring to before. Sometimes they're from, let's say, an injury, right? That one's in the shoulder. Sometimes they're from emotional turmoil in the pelvis, let's say the pelvic region. Sometimes they're limiting thoughts, such as I'm not good enough, nobody likes me, I did it wrong again. And sometimes they're collective beliefs. We're all gonna, we're all just, I don't know, whatever the collective belief might be. I'm not going to succeed in life because I don't wear this particular outfit. I don't know. Whatever the collective belief is. I'm seeing it more be religious, political thoughts. And it might be a whole group of people who believe something, and that's out here in this field. It's all still connected in that quantum though, right? And it's all still connected, and eventually those collective thoughts can be felt in the body. It's like a tug. It's like a string. You could picture a string attached to that. And that collective thought or energy might be strung into the heart of the human. And it might pull at our heartstrings. We might believe that there's no hope. And so we walk around feeling that lack of hope, that depression, anxiety. And by the way, this video isn't talking just specifically about mental, emotional health and well-being. It's all connected. But I am saying that sometimes these collective belief systems pull on our heartstrings. We see a group of people suffering, and then we feel guilt or shame because we're not suffering, which then puts us into the same energy as suffering, so that we can feel, all right, I'm not, a bad person anymore because I'm suffering too. And that's happening a lot. That continues to feed back into that particular collective energy of suffering. And let's say this one's attached, I'm going to do this as fear, right? So I'm just labeling these blobs of energy or energy cysts, suffering, fear, that are connected through strings, kind of like a puppet, right? And then the collective experience creates more things that feed into that, because that energy keeps us in that bubble of reality, we'll say. And I'm not going to get into all of that yet, but so pretend that this is the earth, right? Also. So you've got the earth and you're the earth. So you got all this stuff. This is the battle of, the Civil War. This is that particular, this is this, and it's all attached in the earth. So what happens is, as these things are, let's say, agitated. So I'm going to agitate one of these things. Right, it's highlighted. That's one variation. Now it's agitated. Now that feels heightened right now in the collective experience. And we've got the solar activity, we've got the moon, we've got the political realm. Everything's heating up and firing up, and it's poking that energy cyst bubble, and it's causing us to feel the residue, the resonance of that particular bubble. And we're like, God, I just don't understand why I'm feeling so agitated. Because that's being brought up, it's being cleared, it's being focused on. It might be a lot of energy that's being pushed in that direction, and it might be having a boomerang effect and coming back at us. And for one of the reasons for a lot of us is so that we could clear it, so we can get rid of that distortion. So let's say this big energy cyst that's held in the earth, as a for instance, is now all of a sudden cleared. It just kind of dissolves, goes away. The earth has an earthquake, a volcano erupts, we have a big blowout argument, and then we're like, oh, I'm so glad that I spoke my truth. Sorry that it happened that way. I'm sorry if I said words that were unkind, vice versa. You work it out. Or you guys move on, right? A fight happens, whatever. Simultaneously, the earth belches. The earth has a crack in it, and sulfur comes up. The volcano explodes. Now there's this big gap. I see this in healing work. I had it happen to myself. So there's this big hole where before it was, we built like a pocket around it. And that's what the body does when it's protecting itself, right? It protects itself. So it built this pocket around it. So before there was a buffer, okay? There was a buffer zone, a blanket. So if you picture, I've said before, sometimes it's easier to be unhappy than it is to be happy. While that sounds silly, let's think about that, right? How many of people do we know who it's a habit pattern? They're not comfortable going outside of the pattern. So their pattern is to suffer because the world is suffering. Their pattern is to complain because that's what they're used to doing. Just like somebody financially, they're afraid of money. So they're constantly in need, not having enough, right? It's like these patterns that we create, and that essentially creates this energy cyst that we then continue to feed, which becomes an entity, and that entity is fear. That entity is, a belief system. It's a structure, and that structure holds a pattern in our fields, in our bodies, in our emotions, our mental, our thoughts, our feelings, and the buffering zone is now being removed. Now all of a sudden, as the rubble clears, we have to rebuild that hole, or we have to heal that. So sometimes when we are in the habit, it's like being in a bad relationship. Somebody might stay in a bad relationship because they have this fear of being alone. Then they're going to have to fill that loneliness with their own strength. And it's easier to stay in a bad relationship because of the fear of being alone. But once that is cleared, and that is that open gap, when let's say the people break up and now you're alone, you find something else within you to fulfill that gap. Whether it's friendships, whether it's volunteer work, whether it's creating beautiful, artwork or woodwork or whatever it might be. Maybe it's learning a new trade. Then once those new things you start to build up that energy again, right? So this starts to fill in. And that hole that was in the auric field or in the body of the earth or whatever is now stabilized. And you begin to feel more complete and whole, because before you were so used to having this, the earth was so used to carrying these wounds that were creating these feedback loops, right? Now once that, we'll put a little sunlight in here, a little sunshine. Okay, I'm doing a terrible job drawing, but you get my point. Now that energy is renewed. And so it feels sometimes before you get to that point uncomfortable. It feels like somebody's cut your string and you don't know where you're anchored to anymore. Sometimes it feels so ungrounded. It can give us a sense of, we might feel isolated, fearful. We might feel this anxiety because we don't know what's on the horizon. We can't see clearly because we've been so used to this buffer, this blanket hanging on us. I'm seeing a reference to Pigpen from Charlie Brown. I'm seeing a reference to that heavy blanket, or what's not Pigpen, Linus, security blanket. Like once that goes, you feel lighter. Maybe not right away. At first it feels off. It doesn't feel right. You feel anxious and sad because that was your comfort zone, even if it wasn't necessarily for your highest good. So that leads me to the next topic, which is now we're going into this space where we're asking for our highest and greatest good to come online, for us to remember more of who we are. And all of these energy cysts were patterns that we created, in some cases as a distraction, so that we wouldn't necessarily recognize our own power. And I know that sounds weird, but I listen to people sometimes talk about the us versus them story. These are the bad guys, and then we're the good guys. Technically, we all agreed to that, or we created that to some extent, even if it was unconscious. So what's happening is we're becoming more conscious. And that's where we hear the ascension, the awakening. We're moving up. So now this bandwidth that was holding all this density, as a for instance. So from one perspective, now this version, let's call it 3D, that density is getting lighter and maybe begins to dissolve. So now that container that we were held within before is gone, or there's just pieces of it. And so that footing that we were standing on before isn't there anymore. And for some of us, rather than feeling, oh, I'm expansive and light as a feather, we want to contract because we're not used to having this much freedom. We're not used to not feeling dread. So we feel it. It's like a memory coming online. We're feeling anxiety. We're feeling, because this is now starting to dissolve. I didn't delete this, but we'll kind of clear that out. So that doesn't mean some things aren't still attached. We're still going to experience those things and this is another version of, let's say, ascension from one perspective. So now we're in higher dimension, and all of these are nesting dolls. Can we oscillate? From my perspective, yes. Can that little circle come back? Sure, we can shrink and contract and go back into the old patterns temporarily. But once you've kind of cleared this out, again, the word I'm hearing is conscious. We become more conscious of when we're not here now, because we've had that taste and we feel what it feels like. And even though it might be scary in the beginning, all of a sudden we're going to feel and recognize when we're going backwards. And that can be equally scary too, because all of a sudden we're going, no, I don't want to go backwards. But something is bringing our awareness up, bringing our attention up, that we're in the process of clearing. Also, what I'm being shown is some of us came here to integrate those feelings and emotions for the collective. Doesn't mean that we're doing the work for them. What I'm hearing is some of us just picked up extracurricular assignments. Did you ever have the teacher say, if you want an extra credit, do this? So you did your homework and then you do extra credit on top of it. Some of us came here to do that extra credit. I know. Now you might be going, I changed my mind. But some of us are doing that. We're here to stabilize the field. And in doing that, we sometimes feel these emotions stronger than other people. And it allows us to add more flavor to our soup from one perspective. And I know some of us are like, all right, I can't handle any more spice. This is it. So I'm going to go into the next phase, which is talking about what happens if you're overwhelmed. How do you deal with that? Okay, let me see if I'm forgetting anything. Oh, so there's going to be parts of the earth that, just because, as we know, if there's an earthquake, some places aren't affected. That volcano might not hurt anybody. It might just be, an explosion that allows for the stuck energy or the expansion to occur, or the nutrients, the sulfur, the gas, all of that to be expressed and expelled, so that it can be then received, integrated, and utilized for nutrition or flavor for the soup, if that makes sense. Okay. There's so many different levels we could go to with that. In some areas, it's going to be a mess. There's going to be rubble. There's going to be a dark night of the soul. So I'm going back and forth between earthquake in the body and the human, or a volcano, and on the earth. So in some cases, there's going to need to be cleanup. There's going to need to be teamwork. We're going to need help. We're going to need to help each other. And it's going to require time in order to clear out the rubble, in order to bring ourselves out of all the stuff that's been exposed in our emotions, in our past, from what we believed, whatever it might be. Also, literally, physically, sometimes we have to heal. And then the earth might need more than just the opportunity to release. So it's recognizing that. The other thing that I was called to share, that my guides were kind of showing as I was drawing these pictures, is that it's like we're rebuilding our auric field after that happens. It's like we're rebuilding our light infrastructure, if you want to call it that. And so while that's happening, we might feel more raw, because as we become more conscious and aware of our feelings, our sensing, things like that, which you can be very much an empath or a feeler and not be conscious, by the way. Some people just are that way. But for those of us who are consciously navigating, becoming aware of our surroundings, recognizing some of the things that are going on and seeing it from a different perspective, I'm going to use this as an example. This is a bigger perspective. Now we can see farther, whereas before that ring stopped us from seeing that far. Now we're seeing out farther and we're like, whoa, I didn't know that was there. And some people are going, whoa, I didn't know that was there, right? See this, the two tones, like, oh, I don't want to look at that. And other people are like, wow, so expansive. And other people are like, that's scary. So on that note, some people are still going to have this stuff in their field. And this person can be existing in that space while the person next to them might still have the ring around them in that space. It's just how it is from my perspective. Okay. So where was I going with that? So simple, just to recognize this, I think is really important. I really wanted to bring that up and bring it to our awareness. And this is going to be relevant for as long as it's relevant, especially during this, massive change that we're all going through. So how do we navigate that? And that's, again, I'm going to do a separate video on this, but simple, get back to simplicity. So just going to really quickly make a quick list. No, I'm not. I don't have time. So I'm going to rattle off some things off the top of my head and just invite you guys to look it up on your own. Be self-sufficient is one of the biggest things that's been coming through. Recognize that we are not alone in this. Each of us is going through that, what I just pointed out. The earth is going through this. And we're all together on the earth feeling all of this stuff. Some people have so many blankets and buffers that they don't feel it at all. And that is their journey. Getting back to simplicity is really important, such as breath work. Now, what I'm hearing is conscious simplicity. So sure, we know we should drink more water. Sure, we should know we should go outside and get some sunshine. Yes, it's good to walk on the earth barefoot. But taking that next step and adding our intention, direction, focus, and awareness to that makes it a conscious experience rather than us being asleep at the wheel, rather than us going through the motions. Because sometimes we go through the emotion, or well, the emotions, E equals energy and motion. Anyways, sometimes we go through those things and we aren't necessarily getting the greatest benefit from them. So it's recognizing that we are, not just a body going through our day. We're not just a brain. We're not just a mind. We're not just, we're connected through this fabric of, when I say reality, energy, waves, electricity, particles, photons, right? All of that we are embedded within and animated through. So being conscious while we go through our daily activities is essentially what's happening. That's what ascension is from one perspective. When we remember something, we're waking up to something, we're becoming conscious of it versus going through the motions. So conscious breathing, right? Conscious interaction with our fellow brothers and sisters. Walking, go for a walk, but don't just stare at your phone or listen blindly to some podcast. Like, stop, pause the podcast and feel into what this person is saying. What is that? Looking at the trees that we're walking under, noticing the leaves. If you're hearing a bird, tuning into the bird, feeling the bird's song coming out of the silence that is the background, that is the photons, that is the light waves, that is the sound that you are also connected to, that you are also, right, animated through. That bird is coming through that same field. So it's starting to become conscious of all that. Then we can start to recognize the disturbances in that, which are the negative thought patterns, which are the feelings of lack or not enough. We start to recognize those and we start to become conscious of how different they feel, how different they make us feel, how we are responding to those. And then we can either begin to dissolve them if they're in our own belief system, our own body, and we can also recognize when they're out here because they're part of the collective, trying to create that link. I'm hearing the neural link, right, to our brain, and we can consciously say, no, thank you. I see you. No, thank you. Clear. So I do mantras such as I clear, revoke, remove, and dissolve all energies that no longer serve me for my highest good. I clear that from my field now. I even do it with songs. Do you guys ever have a day where you wake up and you keep hearing the same song over and over again? Sometimes it's playing in the background. It's unconscious. It's a pattern. And all of a sudden, I'll think to myself, how long has that song been going on in my head? Well, the first thing I'll do is look it up to see if it has a meaning for me, because I look at a lot of things as synchronistic. And then if I recognize, nope, I heard it on the radio and it just hasn't gotten out of my head. That's what happens when we watch the news. That's what happens when we read the newspaper. That's what happens when we go on social media and you've got that program in the background of all those poor animals that don't have a home, that are in the shelter. Stop playing that song over and over again, or do something about it. And by you consciously saying, no, thank you, you're doing something about it. You're shifting your frequency, you're shifting your awareness, you're going back into the space of expansion rather than being controlled by your thoughts or the patterns that are controlling your thoughts, the sounds, the frequencies that are being blasted all around us from the collective experience. And then we're able to take back our power rather than having all those gaps, right? So I cleared off that picture, but if you pictured my little stick figure earlier inside the circle, once those holes are open in the auric field. It's like, okay, I removed that thought pattern of lack. What are you going to fill it with? More of something else? So sometimes it's good to be aware that you are more vulnerable as this is happening at times. You're going to feel more raw and edgy. You're going to potentially respond or react because you're not used to feeling whatever it is that you're feeling. It can make us tired, right? So going back to saying those mantras, affirmations, and words have power and energy. Whether you believe it or not is important. Sometimes seeing is believing, but sometimes just recognizing that magic can happen and being available for it, being receptive to it is key. Because we are asking for healing, and then this happens, and we're like, never mind, I changed my mind, I'm fine where I was. Well, maybe we were fine, but now that this golden age is coming in, something else, our higher self, our divine blueprint is like, hey, it's time to move on up. That means you're not fine. That means what was fine before isn't fine moving forward. And sometimes it is. The irony in all of this is at the core of it, we're already perfect, right? We're already these beings of beautiful light that are like playing this game that we're not. So could this instantly change for us? Absolutely, it can. In the meantime, walking, meditation doesn't have to be traditional. It can just be listening to a guided meditation. It can be yoga nidra. I highly encourage yoga nidra. Heart math. Listening to inspiring stories. I love near-death experiencer stories. Laying down in a field of grass, right? Going and volunteering. Again, breath work, conscious breath work. Am I breathing? How am I breathing? Am I holding my breath? Am I letting go of my breath? So I always recommend 5 counts in, 5 counts out for 2 minutes. Maybe go into the heart and feel gratitude for that bird that you saw on your walk. Feel going into your heart while you breathe 5 counts in, 5 counts out, feeling gratitude for your children, your parents, maybe just the fact that you have legs to walk with. Maybe you don't have legs and you're grateful that you have such strong arms. Maybe you're grateful because of a school teacher that's had an impact on you. Maybe you're happy that you are alive. Maybe you'd like to feel grateful, and that's, you're working towards that. Which in reality, if you're here, there's so many things to be grateful for. It doesn't have to be some big fireworks, which I talked about in my video yesterday or the day before. So it's noticing the little things. Water. I just talked with a client about this. Water, 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 water. So when you're going through this and you have this stuck energy that's like, doesn't want to let go, sometimes it's like fear. Okay, it's being pulled out. Okay, no, it's back, right? Because we're so used to carrying that baggage, right? It's almost, I'm seeing that vision. I've talked about this before. You guys ever seen The Labyrinth? If you haven't, I highly recommend it. Of the backpack, all the stuff that we have on our backs. It's like we feel like we need that trinket to make us feel, important, whatever it might be. Letting that go sometimes makes us feel empty, Sometimes we're letting go of a title, we're moving on, we're retiring. That's a whole other can of worms. Okay. So lots of different things. I will try to do a separate video of just those tools. Water, so showers with the mantras, with the affirmations, grounding. If you're sitting at a desk all day, use a grounding mat, stick your feet in a plant. I've talked about this before. Get outside, get in the sun, at least for 10 minutes. Light therapy can be helpful. Yeah, and the other thing I really want to point out too is while you're doing this work, recognizing that sometimes you don't have to keep doing the shadow work. So I've had clients who do not respond well to, is it EMDR, I think, or where you go back and you revisit your trauma and then you talk about it. In some cases, that can be really valuable and really helpful. And I know a lot of people that works brilliantly for. I also know an equal amount of people that it doesn't work well for them. It actually puts them back into the trauma and they keep going back to that same spot. Part of this is about us, what I pointed out earlier with that picture of holding that pattern. It's about us letting that go. Now, some of us have created a buffer and we've been ignoring it, right? And that's where that work might be helpful. But sometimes when we do energy work, we don't know what that is. I'm giving this as a for instance, that's bothering us. And guess what? Sometimes we don't need to know. From my perspective, you do not have to label it. It doesn't have to be identified. We do not have to identify with our fear or our past version of trauma. It's okay. And that's the other message is it's okay to let it go. Because a lot of times we feel like we can't let it go because we haven't addressed it. We haven't talked about it. We haven't really gotten to the heart of the matter. Well, the heart of the matter is us. We are the heart. We are matter. So whatever that is, that matter that we have created or has been created in our field that we're unwilling to let go of, sometimes it's just about us giving ourselves permission not to hang on to it. And that's okay too. So everybody is different. And so I would recommend sometimes, and by the way, that's not spiritual bypassing, right? Sometimes it is going to, I'm hearing crisis center, like getting to the center of the crisis and kind of dissecting it. But a therapist, movement, really important. For certain people, it's more important than others. For some people, when I'm doing a session and I'm working with someone, for some people, more movement is better. Fire, movement, energy work, talk, creativity. For other people, silence, meditation, sleep, right? For some people, they need more sleep. They need more, I guess, I know there's Ayurvedic stuff that they talk about, or acupuncture, right? You've got the fire meridian, you've got the water. Some people need more wood. I don't understand all of it, but that is how this looks. So it isn't always what we think it is. It isn't always that we need to sit down and meditate and sage the room. And while that can be very valuable, I love doing it. I do it all the time. It's equally valued to get out and go for a walk, to play with your dog, to go to a playground and get on the swing set, do yoga. Breath work in all of it is important because that is movement. So that's it in a nutshell. This was a long one. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope that you guys found this helpful. And please share and like these videos with others that you might find, that they might find helpful, or you think they might find helpful. In the meantime, to be continued as always, and namaste. And thank you guys so much for those of you who have stuck with me, or if you're new to this channel and you've been watching my videos, I really greatly appreciate it. This has been a long journey for me, and it continues to be a very fun and fulfilling one, while simultaneously it can be a very frustrating and difficult one. And that's the juice, that's the spice. That's, somebody asked the other day about like what we like most about, or what being a human is all about. And for me, it's feeling. It's having that sense of feeling, the experience of it all. And for everyone, that experience and what they want, what they're going through is different. So just being in that space of heartfelt coherence and appreciation and gratitude for whatever path feels good for you, and recognition and non-judgment that whatever path feels good for someone else might look different too, is always really important right now. Okay, to be continued. Namaste.